In the last 24 hours, you could say that the landscape of the National Basketball Association has been dramatically changed. In the NBA Draft Lottery happened yesterday, and we will talk all about that in today's episode. We have some questions to answer from the fallout of a crazy night in the NBA, which included the 2025 NBA Draft Lottery. We will be talking about the fallout from specifically our teams, which were intermingled in a way, and that it came down to those two teams to decide who would win the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. We will talk about that at the end of today's show here on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. But before we get to that, we will be continuing our post-spring college football top 25 burning questions series. Part 1 we recorded last week. That is up on our channel. Go check it out. We talked about the 6 SEC teams that Joel Klatt has in his preseason top 25. And today we will be talking about the 5 Big Ten teams that he has in his top 15, along with the Clemson Tigers. So, if you like what we do here on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. And of course, go check out all of our other content, which is up on our channel, including the Raw Prospect Football Podcast and a bonus NBA episode that will be coming out in the next 12 hours. Okay.
I'm good, man.
Let's go ahead and get started. But before we do that,
literally,
let me welcome in my co-host,
Mr.
Remy Nixon. How are you today?
Clocked out, and I'm in the employee lounge type of area recording this. A bit of a subdued intro there from Michael, as you can tell. So we're recording this at around 10 p.m. Central Time. So we've got a lot to get to tonight, and we want to get this in all before midnight. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, let's do it. So, the number 1 team in Joel Klatt's post-spring top 25, so post-spring football practice for all these programs, is the Penn State Nittany Lions. And so, the question for Penn State, or the questions that we're going to ask today for Penn State are, do you believe that their returning quarterback, Drew Allar, needs to be the best quarterback in the Big Ten for Penn State to meet
I'll start
its
with this.
2025 expectations,
Joel Klatt
whatever
had
you
them
think
at number
those
1
are.
in his rankings, meaning that as of right now, post the spring portal, he thinks Penn State is the best team in college football. So the expectations are through the roof. So I think the expectations are one thing, but in order for them to leave the season without feeling just a sense of disappointment, yes, Drew Allar has to play up to a certain level. And given that a lot of the quarterbacks in the Big Ten that were the top guys last year left for the NFL, he's the guy with the experience in that conference now. So there's an expectation there that he can take that leap and be the best quarterback in that conference. So, yes, I think in order for them to reach their goals, in order for them to, regardless of where they end up, where their season ends up falling, if Drew Allar doesn't play up to expectations, that fan base is not going to feel good about where they're at come 12 months' time.
So considering that he is a 2026 NFL draft QB prospect, he'll presumably be in that draft next year. From an on-field standpoint, what are the things that you would like to see Drew Allar do better
from a consistency standpoint? I think that would take his game to the next level. He works the short game pretty well. We saw him hit some high level down the field throws against Oregon in the Big Ten championship game as well. But I think that intermediate part of the field, which we see the majority of NFL quarterbacks, in order to find success, they have to master that part of the field. I think that's the part of his game that has to get better. He doesn't attack between 10 to 20 yards past the line of scrimmage, especially not in between the numbers.
Penn State last year, meaning this past year, 2024, they reached the college football playoff semifinals. And I believe I've said this offseason already on this very podcast, in that I think in order for 2025 to be considered a successful season, barring that most of their key players stay healthy, of course, I think just like Texas has done over the past 2 years, when they got to the semifinal back in 2023, lost to Washington, and then got back to the semifinal this past year, I think Penn State, in order for this to be a successful season, with the perceived talent on this roster, both on offense and defense, need to try to do something similar. Get back to where they were a year ago, at the very minimum. Now, of course, there are extenuating circumstances like injuries that could happen, which would change that. But if this team's fully healthy with the talent that it added through the transfer portal, even with some of the talent that it lost, you're bringing back two fantastic backs. Two of the top, I would say, 5 running backs in college football this upcoming year. You're bringing, presumably, if he can play up to the level you speak to, a top 5 quarterback in college football back who has 2+ years of starting experience. You're bringing in 3 really productive receivers to try to replace some of the receiving production that you lose in Tyler Warren. And then your defense, even though you lose a guy like, the edge rusher who just went into the draft. Why am I blanking on his name? Abdul Carter. Even though you lose him and some pieces in the secondary, you're still going to have a very good defense. This team has all the parts, and so I believe Drew Allar needs to perform like a minimum top 2, top 3 quarterback in the Big Ten. When I look at the landscape of Big Ten quarterbacks. And along with that, a big key in this offense in year 2 under Andy Kotelnicki, who they hired last offseason from Kansas, who did a very good job in year 1. A big key is going to be who's going to emerge at the wide receiver position. Because the past couple of years for Penn State, people have been asking, where's the production in the wide receiver room? Who's going to eventually emerge? Who can emerge as a true number 1 receiver for this team? Will the receivers eventually play a bigger role in this offense? Because they really haven't the past couple of years. Well, I like what Penn State did in the portal to address that. And that's the second question here. How much will the portal wide receiver additions help? I think that's a key X factor. Not only for Drew Allar, but this team. Because they lost Tyler Warren to the NFL draft. And so they go get a guy in Trevor Pena from Syracuse. Really productive receiver. One of the top wide receivers in the spring portal. They also bring in Devontae Ross from Troy and Kyron Hudson from USC. The trio of wide receivers that they brought in through the transfer portal, get this. Here's a paper popper stat. 198 receptions for 2,446 receiving yards and 23 touchdowns last year. Very productive wide receiver trio that they brought in. So who's going to emerge out of that group? Can they aid Drew Allar in the passing game? Because we know the run game's presumably going to be there. It's been there the past couple of years. The same components are there. Drew Allar hopefully takes another step, but his wide receivers are going to have to help him. They're going to have to create separation. They're going to have to win in one-on-one coverage. And so those three players that I just mentioned, who were all very productive last year at different places, are going to be a key X factor for Penn State to reach its goals this year. But in all of these outlets that are releasing preseason top 25 post-spring rankings, including a guy like Josh Pate, who just released his a couple days ago on his show, and he doesn't do rankings, but it's the middle of the off season, it's May. He said, "Screw it. People are asking me to do it. I'll do it." And he doesn't have Penn State number 1, but he's got Penn State like number 3. They're like a consensus top 3 team. So, big expectations in Happy Valley this upcoming season. Let's move on to another Big Ten team, the national champions, the defending national champions in the Ohio State Buckeyes. There's a lot of turnover here, but it's still a very talented roster. Maybe not as talented as last season, but they still have a ton of talent on this roster, including, you could argue, the 2 best non-quarterback players in all of college football. Maybe the 2 best college football players, period, this upcoming season. One on defense, one on offense. Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs on defense. So, it's not just the player turnover, though. They have 2 new coordinators, which are going to play a big part in how much success they can follow up their national championship with in 2025. They promote their wide receiver coach, Brian Hartline, to offensive coordinator, with Chip Kelly leaving for the NFL. And they bring in Matt Patricia, who we all know very well from his days in the NFL, to be their defensive coordinator. So my question for you, Emmy, knowing those 2 names and knowing everything you know right now about Ohio State, how would you assess the job that Ohio State has done with these new coordinator hires?
Well,
and I guess
on paper,
what are your biggest questions for Ohio State?
Feel more confident. Well, you would assume that you would feel more confident about Matt Patricia, given that he's won Super Bowls as a defensive coordinator. But it's actually the opposite for me. I actually feel more confident in Brian Hartline succeeding in that spot, given his track record, recruiting wide receivers, developing wide receivers. And I think just clearly this was a move that they've been waiting to make for a while, given that Brian Hartline stuck around at Ohio State this long. He knew that this was coming. I think he's ready to, take the next step. And I think he's a future head coach, whether it be in college football or in the NFL. He's a guy that's on the rise for sure. Matt Patricia, I mean, we kind of know who he is as a commodity. He's not like the most rah-rah guy as a coach, I would say. He's more reserved, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons he didn't do so hot as a head coach. But he knows defense. He knows that Bill Belichick style scheme. And, whether it translates to the college game, that's yet to be seen. I think that's the question that I would have, is how well does the, Bill Belichick style of defense translate?
Yeah, I really like the Brian Hartline hire. He's fairly young. The key for him is going to be how well is he able to communicate his messaging to a young quarterback in Julian Sayin, who's the projected starter there. Sayin was the top-rated quarterback in the 2024 recruiting class. He was a redshirt freshman last year. Started his career at Alabama, but transferred to Ohio State. The Buckeye, good reviews from spring football, from everything I've heard. He's the projected starter. How well is Brian Hartline able to communicate his message and develop a guy like Julian Sayin? What is their relationship like? That matters. Relationship between offensive coordinator and quarterback, that matters. I have no questions about Brian Hartline's ability to recruit. I've got no questions about his ability to develop talent at the skill positions, including wide receiver. He might be the best that we've seen in college football this side of the 2010s. At any position, I mean, he just puts wide receiver after wide receiver after wide receiver. We could spend an entire podcast or series of podcasts talking about all the Ohio State wide receivers that Brian Hartline has put into the NFL. And he's got a good group there still, even though they lose Emeka Egbuka to the draft. I have no questions about all that. It's just him and the quarterback. Um, and even though they lose Henderson and Judkins, both day 2 picks, day 1, day 2 picks in the draft, they still have a lot of talent there. James People is going to get his shot to be their running back. Didn't play a whole lot last year, but I think they still have tons of talent. They bring in C.J. Donaldson through the portal, who was a good back at West Virginia. 2,058 yards in 3 seasons for the Mountaineers. They've got talent all over. They bring in Max Clare, one of the best tight ends, if not the best tight end in college football this upcoming season, from Purdue. Texas was actually looking at him in the winter portal, but he ended up going to Ohio State. They've got talent everywhere. It's just going to be a matter of how does Brian Hartline and Julian Sayin, the projected starter, work in tandem. How can he develop them? And then Matt Patricia, he hasn't coached at the college levels since 2003, in over 20 years, when he was a grad assistant at Syracuse. So I have a lot of questions there. I know he knows football. He's coached in the NFL for very long. He's won a lot of Super Bowls. And he's going to have a ton of talent on that side of the ball, even though they lost quite a bit to the NFL draft. Ohio State has blue chippers everywhere, including one of the best in Caleb Downs. But I have more questions. How does he work with, younger people? Not in the NFL anymore. It's different in college. What kind of scheme do they run? Does it fit their personnel? There are more questions on that side of the ball with the loss of JT Tumialoa and Jack Sawyer. And a lot of the culture players on that side of the ball, they're gone now. So it's going to be a younger Ohio State team, younger quarterback, younger receivers, younger players everywhere, including on the offensive line, because they lose pieces on the offensive line as well. Simmons, the tackle, even though he didn't play last year, he's gone. Seth McLaughlin, I think he's gone. So what happens with the offensive line? But younger Ohio State team, what is the Matt Patricia side of things look like? But we can move on. Do you have anything else you wanted to say on Ohio State?
In the Big Ten championship once again. I even though they're losing players to the NFL over again, obviously, I still think they're going to be playing in Indianapolis.
Let's talk about the team that won the Big Ten championship last year, the Oregon Ducks. You're wearing the color green, so let's talk about the Ducks. We have a history talking about Ducks. Off the air and on the air, but we won't get into that right now. Going into year 4 under Dan Lanning, what do you think Oregon needs to do this year to make it a success? And do you think, from what you know, do you think they've done enough in the portal and in recruiting to address any concerns? Do you think this Oregon team, with a new quarterback and all the talent they're trying to replace, do you think it's set up to accomplish its goals this year? And what do you think those goals are?
Oregon losing 14 players to the portal, that's less than they lost last year, I think. I think they lost 16 players to the portal last year. They've had I think it's a normal amount of portal attrition that, a top program faces. It's just inevitable in this stage of college football. And I think they've replaced their talent well. They've gone out and filled holes on the defensive line. They've added a running back. They've added wide receivers. Obviously, Decorium Moore, 5-star wide receiver that they stole from Texas, which I'm not salty about at all. Yeah. So I think
absolute stud.
From a roster building standpoint, if you're an Oregon fan, you can't ask for much more. Now it's just about getting it done on the field. So what do they need to accomplish? They need to go out and win the Big Ten championship, and well, defend it because they obviously won it last year, but then get it done in the playoff. I think that's really what it comes down to, because I think Oregon, you feel pretty good about their chances to make the playoff. It's just, what are they going to do when they get there?
Yeah, I think I'll put it simply. I think if you're Oregon, you should have the expectation that you get to the Big Ten championship game. Now, whatever happens when you get there, since you won it last year, I don't really care all that much. It's just if you're an Oregon fan, you probably like to win it when you get there because it gives you the first round bye. At least as of the way the playoff is structured right now. It's one less game that you have to play. You get more time off. If you get there, you probably want to win it, and I think Oregon's capable of doing so. They did it last year. But even if they don't make it for whatever reason to the Big Ten championship game, but they still make the playoff, the bottom line of this season for Oregon, regardless of anything else that happens, is you got to make the playoff and you got to win a game in the playoff. Minimum. One game in the playoff. Hopefully, they get a better draw this time. With the landscape of college football right now and how it looks, at least on paper, I don't think there's going to be a team like Ohio State that they're going to run into in their first game, especially if they're hosting a game. There's not going to be that kind of freight train. I don't think you're going to get screwed with that. And so they need to win a game, at least. And you'd like, if you're an Oregon fan, to get to a national semifinal, where these other programs that they're trying to join at the top echelon of college football, Ohio State and Georgia in particular, have been many times. Texas has already been a couple times. They're kind of creeping up into that tier along with Oregon. So that's what they need to do. It's pretty simple. Get into the playoff, however you do that. You'd like to get home field or you'd like to get a first round bye if you can. But I don't think winning the Big Ten championship is required. I think what is absolutely required is winning in the playoff. Because they haven't done that yet. That's the next step they have to take as a program. They already proved in year one they can win the Big Ten. Can they do it in the college football playoff? That's what we're waiting to see. So, do they have enough to do that? Well, a lot of it surrounds Dante Moore. Really talented kid. I fully believe in Dante Moore with Oregon's ability to bring in quarterbacks, whether it was Bo Nix or Dylan Gabriel, who are already established, but incorporate them into their system. Dante Moore has plenty of talent. I think he's got plenty of talent around him. And I think Oregon did a... Josh Pate says on his show, this is deep in the heart of Longhorn sports, so I'll go ahead and say what he says. The Texas Longhorns are the gold standard right now in talent acquisition in college football. But right up there with Texas is a program like Oregon. They are killing it in talent acquisition, both in recruiting and in the portal. That's what they've done the past couple of years. Dan Lanning has done a fantastic job in recruiting, especially out of state. It's not easy to go into the state of Texas, especially at a school like Duncanville, and pull a guy like DeCorian Moore. He's doing a fantastic job in recruiting. But the portal was, I think, overall a success for Oregon this year. They go in and they get a defensive lineman, 3 offensive linemen who all project to be starters on their offensive line. That was much needed. They get a couple defensive linemen. They get some DBs. They're replacing some talent in their defensive back room. They get a wide receiver. They get a safety, one of the best in the country, and Dylan Thieneman from Purdue. who's going to be a sophomore. He's got 2 years of eligibility remaining. In 24 games in his career, he's got 7 tackles for loss and 6 interceptions. That's a big addition for their secondary.
Is he the kid that opted out?
They get Bear Alexander from USC, a Big Ten rival. Really talented defensive lineman. Yep. He's back, and he's at Oregon now, so we'll see how that goes over. But they add talent at the edge position. They go in, and I think the biggest thing that they did was to go in and get the 3 offensive linemen that they got. One's going to project to be their left tackle, another their right tackle, and then they went in and got Emmanuel Pregnon, a big-time guard from USC, and he's going to start right away on their interior. How those offensive line additions work out, like do they hit on those or do they not, that's going to play a big part in Dante Moore's success and Oregon's overall success as a program this year. But I think they've got all the talent that they need. There are just a couple questions along with all these other teams. How does the quarterback position look? And then do they hit on their portal additions or not? That's really what it comes down to. But the bottom line is, if you're an Oregon fan, you've got to win a game in the playoff this year. I think that's the minimum expectation. We're 25 minutes into the show. We're going to skip Clemson today.
Yeah,
we'll push them to
sounds
next
good.
week. Let's finish the Big Ten. Let's get to Michigan and Illinois. Is that okay with you? Okay. Michigan. Big offseason for Michigan. There's a lot going on in the program. Still, we've got the ripple effects still from the sign stealing scandal. Michigan has self-imposed a 2-game suspension on their head coach Sharon Moore, starting in weeks 3 and 4. I think is the games he's going to be suspended. We're not here to talk about that. That's not what we're going to get into right now. But they had a big offseason, especially in recruiting. Their NIL, fantastic job by their collectives. NIL side of things, they brought in some real talent, including at the quarterback position. The best quarterback in America, 5-star quarterback Bryce Underwood. Massively talented kid. It's either going to be him or a transfer that they brought in at quarterback this year. And so my question to you is, how much improved do you think Michigan's offense could be in 2025?
Well, I think he gives you a dynamism
this
that you just
freshman
simply have
quarterback
not had
Bryce
in
Underwood
terms of
starts.
mobility. And I also just think the arm talent and just the confidence to push the ball down the field. I think there's just a certain level of just like it factor. And I know that's like so cliche and like it's easy to roll your eyes at that, but it really is a thing. Like if you follow recruiting at all, you know it factor is actually a thing. Like it really is, and he's got that. Like he steps on the field and his tape pops off the screen as a quarterback. Like the ball just explodes off of his hand, off his fingertips. He's got a rocket for an arm. So yeah, I mean Michigan, their offense, it's really, if their running game continues to be as good as it has been, they could have a top 30 offense in the country. I wouldn't rule that out.
Yeah, I think so too. Couple questions for Michigan on offense. Number one, I think there's a good chance you could see Mikey Keene, who they got as a transfer from, I believe, UCF, Indiana. Or it's either Indiana or UCF. I'll figure it out. But he brings a couple years of starting experience to Michigan. He's probably more play ready, technically, week 1 We'll see what happens in fall camp. Bring starting experience to the table. Something Michigan lacked last year. I mean, going into last year, you had Alex Orji as the starter, and he rarely ever played, and he didn't bring anything to the passing game. So you get him. He played at UCF. He's got past experience with Chip Kelly. He's played a couple years in college football. He might be kind of a bridge quarterback, at least for the start of the season, to kind of bridge to Bryce Underwood later in the year. But I think Bryce Underwood's ultimately going to be the guy for this Michigan team because they didn't pay him all the money that they paid him to flip him from LSU.
Yeah.
Dave Portnoy didn't pay all this money for him as a Michigan booster for him to sit on the bench. And so I think with his potential, young, still will need to refine some skills, as all young quarterbacks do. He's the kind of guy that 3 years down the road,
no question,
in the 2028 NFL draft could be a number one pick. So I think we'll see him on the field eventually, soon as middle of the season. He definitely gives them something they haven't had in a long time from a talent standpoint at the quarterback position. He brings elements. There's elements to his game that not even a guy like J.J. McCarthy had. And that guy won a national championship. So I think Michigan's potential, given that I still think their running game's going to be strong. Look, they lose Khalil Mullings. They lose some production at the running back position, but they bring in Justice Haynes, a transfer from Alabama, who I think is going to be very good behind this Michigan offensive line. He's a bruiser.
Yeah.
616 yards on 104 carries. You do the math there, that's like pretty much 6 yards a carry, I believe. Showed that he's capable as a pass catcher, pulled in 17 receptions last year at Alabama. And then they also have, goodness, who do they have behind him? Jordan Marshall, who was the MVP of their bowl game, the ReliaQuest Bowl against Alabama. He's very talented. So I think the run game's going to be good. It's about how does Bryce Underwood develop at the quarterback position, and then who's going to step up at receiver. Last year at receiver wasn't all that dynamic for Michigan. It was Colston Loveland in this running game. That's a large part of what their offense consisted of last year. But they added some talent at the wide receiver position through the portal. They bring in Donovan McCulley, who's a 6'5" Indiana transfer, who's going to be their new number one receiver. 644 yards, 48 receptions last year. So you add him to Samaj Morgan and Fred Moore, who can hopefully step up from last year's team. I really like this Michigan offense. I think if they're a forget top 30 offense, if they're a top 50 offense with their defense, their offensive line, and their running game, they could be a factor in the Big Ten, college football playoff picture. All right, before we get to our NBA stuff, we have one more program to talk about, and that is the Illinois Fighting Illini, who Joel Klatt has ranked as his number 10 overall team going into this season. Do you think Illinois? This is our question. Indiana fans, don't get mad if you're watching this. Do you think Illinois can be this year's version?
I think they certainly have a chance at that.
Indiana?
I think you look at this schedule, I think they go to Duke early on in the season. I think they play a couple of their other key games at home. They play their toughest game of the season at home, Ohio State, I think in week 6 or 7, I believe. So if you look at it, they probably have the second most experienced quarterback in the Big Ten, outside of Drew Allar and Luke Altmaier. And Luke Altmaier, say what you want about him, like he he's not mistake prone,
Yep.
and he takes care of the football, and he just makes the smart play every time. Like you leave a guy open, he's going to get the ball to him. He's a distributor of the football, and I think at the very least, he is a very good starting caliber quarterback in college. I don't know what that will mean for his NFL, prospects, but he's a very good college quarterback. And with that on your team, you have a chance to win most games. You add on top of that, I really like their head coach. Where did he come from again? He had kind of was like
Brett Bielema. Yep.
kind of in a Dan Campbell kind of way, like kind of this like brickhead mentality, I guess, brought in, and those players respond to that. They've developed this kind of physical style, and it's worked. It's led to more winning than that program has seen in quite a long time.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for Illinois, you look at the overall landscape of college football, the major programs. I mean, you look at just look at Joel Klatt's ranking. Let's take Joel Klatt's ranking, for example. Penn State has their starter back. That's mostly an exception, but just the teams that we've talked about so far. Michigan, new starter, inexperienced. Ohio State, new starter, inexperienced.
Yeah, Dante Moore has a little bit.
Oregon, new
well,
starter, inexperienced.
Different program.
Texas,
Yeah,
new
different
starter,
program.
little bit of experience. Little bit, but not a lot. Just look at all these programs. Alabama, new starter. Georgia, new starter. Clemson returns their starter, but like the teams that return a multi-year really productive starter in this top 25 are few and far between. And so that's a big advantage for Illinois. That's like the biggest advantage is Luke Altmaier, who took a big jump last year. He improved his play, improved his passer rating by 15 points last year. Really efficient, doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes. Had a pretty good offensive line, good running game. Brett Bielema is known for being kind of a hard nose, which I think you were trying to get at with your point. Good defense, like they bring in some talent through the portal. The quarterback can be the great equalizer. If he ends up being maybe even better than Drew Allar, you're not going to tell me that Illinois can't sneak into the playoff. I mean, can he be what? God, the quarterback at Indiana last year, Curtis Rourke. Can he be as good or better than he was last year? If he can, I think everything's in front of Illinois. Pretty manageable schedule. Win your games in your non-conference. Go 6-2. I don't know if they play 8 or 9 games in the Big Ten. Just get to 10-2, and I think against your Big Ten schedule, you could get in the playoff. I think it's pretty manageable. But that's going to be it for part 2 of our college football Joel Klatt based post-spring college football burning questions. Go check out part 1, the SEC. This is the Big Ten. And then part 3, I don't know if it'll be next week or the week after, because we might end up having to transition to some recruiting stuff. But we'll talk about all of the other programs that we've not talked about yet, the interesting ones, which I think are programs like Clemson, Notre Dame, maybe throw in an Ole Miss, maybe a Texas A&M, an Oklahoma, Auburn, those kind of programs, which are in the top 25. They're just not in the group of Big Ten or SEC, which are the conferences we wanted to big time get into. We'll be addressing those here in the next couple weeks. But let's get to what happened last night, the NBA lottery. If you believe, whether you're listening to this podcast or you're watching this podcast, that over the next 20 minutes of this episode, when we're talking about the lottery, if you believe or if you perceive that Emmy is horny or I am horny, you are correct. Because the Dallas Mavericks, with a 1.8% chance, won the NBA draft lottery. Funny story. I'm watching the lottery last night. I turn it on. It's 15 minutes of bullshit. They talk, blah, 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 blah. And then they finally get to the deputy commissioner who announces the picks. And so the way it works is, if you've never watched the draft lottery before, some people think it's rigged. We'll talk about that in a second. The deputy commissioner goes one by one. He announces the 14th pick, the 13th pick, the 12th pick. They go all the way down to the 5th pick. And then they take a commercial break before they announce the top 4. But before they go to the commercial break, you can see, you know who the teams are going to be in the top 4. You just don't know the order. So they drag it out. And so I'm like, holy shit. San Antonio and Dallas are both in the top 4. So what do?
Yeah.
I call Emmy to see if he's watching it. And he wasn't. But he turned it on, and then we both reacted live on the phone to Dallas winning the lottery. So that's a funny story of how it all went down last night. Let's talk about Dallas winning the lottery, but the first question I want to talk about, which everyone's talking about today, is, Emmy?
Maybe. I think is the answer.
Is the NBA draft lottery rigged?
Okay. I think realistically, yes. Back in the day, I genuinely do believe the Patrick Ewing lottery was rigged. But in the modern NBA, I don't think the draft lottery is rigged. There's too much money in it. There's too much on the line. There's billionaires that buy these teams, and there's just they defer the whole lottery system to a third party to ensure competitive balance. Yes, all this kind of stuff is improbable, but I do think as weird as it is that this kind of stuff keeps happening, I don't think it's rigged. If we're being completely realistic with ourselves, I do think it's fun to get into those conversations, though, and when you get into those conversations, you can kind of talk yourself into it being very feasible, which is why people have ran with this idea. And I think the main one is the idea that Adam Silver spoke with Nico Harrison, was like, hey, get Luka to L.A., and in exchange, we'll get you Cooper Flagg. That would explain the, not looking to, shop any other offers than the Lakers. That would explain, the lack of explanations when, trying to explain why he made the trade. That would explain just all of the weirdness that is going on with the Mavericks organization, and with that trade in general. But I don't think it's connected. I don't think it's rigged. But I do think the theories are there for a reason. If you think it's rigged, I'm not even gonna be mad at you.
Yeah, I largely agree. I don't think it's rigged. I think the conversation around we hear this all the time in the NFL, especially in the playoffs. There are Chiefs fans, and then there's everyone else that have a disdain for the Chiefs, because what do the Chiefs do? They win. They win a shit ton. They're the new big boy in the NFL, right? They've won, 3 Super Bowls. They got Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes. People who don't like the Chiefs, there's a large contingent of those people who aren't Chiefs fans. When they win in the playoffs and all these calls go their way, we hear it all the time. This is rigged. The officiating's rigged. The games are rigged. We like something being rigged in sports is kind of the default explanation or excuse for something happening. That's like the default thing people say for something bad, something they perceive to be bad or unfair happening. But I mean, it's the NBA lottery, and you can go watch the room of people that are there in the room. There's representatives from all the teams. There's the machine, the ping pong ball. They're drawing the combinations, announcing the picks as they draw the ping pong balls. I don't know how it all exactly works, but I've seen videos. I know there's a video on Twitter. You can go see the moment they picked the ping pong ball and they said 7. It's Dallas. And, the entire draft room, Nico Harrison included, goes nuts. I don't think they're reacting that way if it's rigged. I think that was a very natural, reaction to getting the number 1 pick. And people don't say this in other years. It's only when there's a perceived to be great or fantastic or generational prospect at the top of the draft. I think, I'll say this. I do agree it's not rigged. Because the one thing you can say is if you know probability to a certain extent, or you've taken a probability class in school before, we know that low probability events happen all the time in different walks of life. Just so happened that the Mavs had a 1.8% chance, a low probability of winning the lottery, but they ended up winning the lottery. I think there were a couple teams that could have won this draft lottery where fans would have said what they said yesterday. It's rigged. You know who those teams are? I think it's the 3 teams at the top of the draft, to be honest with you. I think it's Dallas because of the Luka trade. I think it's San Antonio for obvious reasons, and I think it's Philadelphia.
Maybe you could say Chicago.
Maybe you could say... I mean, I don't know of another team you could really... Maybe you could say New Orleans. Maybe Chicago. I don't know, but I think it's mainly those 3 teams. But I don't think it's rigged. I think there's too many people involved. There's too much money involved. Just the low probability events happen all the time. And life's unfair. So for people who don't like the Mavericks, they're obviously they've got nothing else. They're frustrated. They don't like what happened, and I don't recommend you go into that universe on Twitter. But it is there if you like to partake in those kinds of things. I think the conspiracy theory you bring up is the most interesting one. But I'm not a big conspiracy guy. I've never been. So I don't really like to involve myself in those conversations, even though they're fun to think about. It's funny and it's fun to think about. But from that, just your overall, you've had 24 hours plus to process this. Your overall thoughts on
the basketball
the Mavericks winning the lottery from a basketball standpoint.
Because now you pair Cooper Flagg with a front court of Anthony Davis and Derek Lively, when healthy, of course. Those 2 guys have had injury problems, well-documented injury problems. But when healthy, those 2 guys in the front court paired with Cooper Flagg, I mean, that could instantly be the best, front court in basketball. And best defensive front court in basketball, I should say. Just the ability of all 3 guys to switch, to protect the rim, to just guard 1 through 5. The versatility would just be ridiculous. Now, the other part of it is, how good can Cooper Flagg get within this 2 to 3 year window that Nico Harrison has set? Like, clearly they made the Luka trade because they were like, okay, if we get Anthony Davis, we go for it these next 1 to 2 years while he's, 32, 33 years old. So what does that mean for Cooper Flagg? Like, can he get to the point where he's averaging 22, 23, 24 points per game, as a 20, 21-year-old in his second or third year in the league, while Anthony Davis is still good enough to contend as a best player, or while Kyrie is still good enough to contend as a second best player?
Yeah. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
This kind of flies in the face of karma, that lots of people believe that Nico Harrison shouldn't be rewarded in this way for making the trade that he did, trading away Luka. But I am happy for Mavs fans, because I don't know how much of the stink, I guess you could say, or the pain, or however you want to phrase it, that this particularly takes away from that trade a couple months ago. Mavs fans have largely been living in their sorrows for the past couple months. This is a nice reprieve. It gives them hope. It gives you hope. It gives lots of Mavs fans hope for what these next couple years could be, while Kyrie and Anthony Davis are still around, and you have this talented roster. I think it's huge. I think Cooper Flagg is the most NBA ready domestic, top draft prospect that we've had since Anthony Davis. So I do believe, I say that to say, I think he's the exact type of rookie you want to build your team around. And the Mavericks will be they'll be inserting him, into a rotation with deep playoff expectations for sure. I don't know how deep they're gonna be. We'll talk about that maybe more so after the off season or closer to next year. It all depends on the health of Kyrie and all these other things. But certainly they have a playoff roster. They should be in the playoffs. I think he'll fit like a glove from a basketball standpoint right away. I think he's got superstar upside. We know what he can do as a perimeter creator, not just a shot creator, but from the middle of the floor in those high pick and rolls. We know what he can create. It's kind of like an offensive hub, but it's his defense that I think make him ready to contribute to a championship level roster right away in the NBA. And you insert him with Anthony Davis and Derek Lively, all that length, awareness, and defensive playmaking, it's that's insane. So I'm happy for Mavs fans after what they've gone through the past couple months, but it also, I think a lot of people, including myself, believe that this is just it's so weird how this all happened, but it happened. So there's that. Anything else you want to say in reaction to the Mavs winning the lottery?
Spot to go from Cooper Flagg's standpoint. You get to learn from Klay Thompson. You get to learn from Kyrie. You get to learn from Anthony Davis. You can't ask for much more than that. Yeah. He's certainly developed as a coach.
Yeah, and you get a good coach.
When we made the hire. He's gotten
Jason
a lot better.
Kidd. And it's a... And it's a decently I'll put it this way. You would much rather play, I think, if you're Cooper Flagg,
Yeah.
in Dallas than in Utah or in Washington or in Charlotte. It's just like that's that. Okay. We're not going to get to the Trey Johnson question. We've got plenty of time to dive it. We're going to dive into more of the prospect side of things here soon. But I do want to talk about the Spurs, who got the second pick in the draft. Now, interesting thing about this is the Spurs were projected to get the 8th and the 14th pick because they own the Hawks pick. That ended up being 14. They have that pick now. And then they jumped from 8 to 2 in the lottery. So, big time for San Antonio. This opens up a ton of roads that Brian Wright and this organization couldn't go down. What do I mean by that? Well, with the number 2 pick, you could, 1, draft Dylan Harper from Rutgers, who, in my opinion, is the clear number 2 prospect in this draft. We won't dive deep into his game right now, but I think it's Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, and then everyone else. That's how I would tier it. You can take the best player and add him to your team. Or the Giannis stuff is out there. The KD stuff is out there. We know Houston's going to be involved with one of the two. There might other trade options might emerge as we get closer to the offseason. Presumably, you got the back-to-back Rookie of the Years. Wemby looks to make a full recovery. He's going to be healthy next year as long as he has no setbacks. De'Aaron Fox will be healthy next year. You have Steph Castle. Do you package the number 2 pick along with all these other assets that you have and some of your younger players to go get a Giannis Antetokounmpo or go get another star to add to this team? There are lots of roads they could go down. Before, in fact, in our NBA episode, we talked about the Giannis sweepstakes, and we talked about the teams that could get involved. And what we said was we weren't sure if San Antonio had enough, because at that point in time, a week ago, we knew they had 2 lottery picks, but we didn't think it was going to be Dylan Harper. I think what Dylan Harper allows you to do, you could trade him, or you could you could pick him and trade Stephon Castle if you think Harper has more upside. I think that allows you to trade one of those 2 high upside pieces in a trade package. Before, you didn't want to trade Steph Castle because it was Steph Castle and Wemby as the core. But if you go get Dylan Harper, I think you can convince yourself to trade one of the 2 because you also have De'Aaron Fox. So it could be Harper and Fox, or it could be Castle and Fox, and you trade Dylan Harper. That's not something in the Spurs bag that they had to throw out in a potential Giannis trade beforehand. Here's what I'll say about the Giannis trade, though. I'm not fully sold on it because I know Giannis is great. It has nothing to do with Giannis and how he would fit in San Antonio. I think it'd be an excellent fit alongside Wemby. We've only seen this team, though. We've only seen the Fox and Wemby duo for like 20 games. We think it's going to be great. We think it's going to be awesome. But we've only really seen this team, the core of this team, play together for like 20 games, if that. Does he fit the timeline on the wrong side of 30? Does he instantly make you a championship contender? I think you're trying to skip a step there. And it doesn't seem very Spurs-like to me to tie yourself up into, I think it would be 3 years of paying Giannis an exorbitant amount of money, along with De'Aaron Fox, who you're going to pay When August comes, you presumably are going to give him an extension, and then a couple years down the line, you're going to have to give Wemby an extension. It doesn't seem very Spurs-like to me to try to skip those steps. So I'm sold on the idea of Giannis being like next to Wemby and how it would work from a basketball standpoint potentially, and he's an awesome player. But I don't know that now is the time to do it, just because I don't exactly know what this team is. I know there's a lot of talent here: Steph Castle, De'Aaron Fox, Wemby. Presumably, it could all work out. But I think the Spurs need to try to put themselves in a position next year similar to what the Rockets were this year. Like, be in the playoffs, be in the first round. I don't think you're going to be a championship contender. So that's why I just don't know if you make
if
the
you
Giannis
draft
trade.
Dylan Harper.
But maybe they do. What do you think?
Answer the phone on a De'Aaron Fox?
Yeah. I think Harper is like the thing people bring up with drafting Dylan Harper is like he's another 6'6" wing prospect who's downhill, like attacking with length, downhill, scoring guard, attack downhill. So if you pair him with Steph Castle and De'Aaron Fox, you've got a bunch of like downhill guards with length who can score at the rim and are good at finishing at the rim and are good play creators and stuff like that, but you don't have a ton of perimeter shooting. Dylan Harper really struggled from 3-point range last year. I think he's got the potential to improve, but I don't know if it's a perfect basketball fit. I don't know if Harper, Fox, and Steph Castle with their current skill sets are a perfect basketball fit, but he is the best player. Maybe another option
Charlotte
could be maybe they trade down. Maybe a team like a team that needs a guard comes calling. They trade down a couple of picks and instead they pick a guy like VJ Edgecombe, who's not quite the player or NBA ready, like he's not the all-around guard prospect that Dylan Harper is, but he would fit, I think, more seamlessly into what the Spurs need. But in my opinion, like if I'm the Spurs, I'm drafting the best player and I'm figuring it out from there. That's my take on it right now. My opinion could change, and it could change tomorrow. It could change in 2 weeks. It could change. Yeah. It could change a lot of times by the time the draft comes around. But my opinion right now is just draft Dylan Harper and figure it out.
Don't offer De'Aaron Fox the contract because you give it you're able to give it a year and kind of see what this thing looks like.
Maybe they don't. Yeah, maybe the plan is draft Dylan Harper. If he ends up being great, which I think he can be, maybe De'Aaron Fox at that point is largely expendable. Because Fox, as good as he is, Harper's 5 years younger. He fits your timeline. He's right there with Castle. He can build alongside Wemby, and then I think next year, like if you can figure out what this team is, I think next year is the year where after you make the playoffs, after you've taken some lumps in the playoffs as a younger team, that's when you can, I think, go attack whoever it might be. Go get a star. Because if you don't make a Giannis trade, you're still going to have a lot of young players and lots of draft picks over the next couple of years. You got 2 Atlanta picks next year. So, what do those look like? I don't know, but those could be valuable. Those could end up being very valuable picks to package in a trade next year. I think next year Like if this was 2026 and we were talking about it, and we knew what this team was, I'd be all for going to get Giannis. But I don't know if now's the time. But we'll see what happens. I think right now you take the best player, and that's Dylan Harper, and then maybe the first couple months of the season, like Harper emerges as a leader for Rookie of the Year, and he's great, and you don't even have to pay Fox. Maybe you let Fox walk, and that's kind of your core.
You have
it's
Castle,
Harper, Castle, and
he's a great playmaker,
and
passer.
Wimby. Fantastic. All top four picks.
I love the idea.
Who would have thought?
I really do.
Yeah, I do too. Okay, we'll wrap it up there. We're over an hour. I don't think we're gonna get to the golf stuff. We're actually gonna. I don't know if we're gonna get to that. Maybe we'll just post our picks on social media. I think we'll do that. Hopefully, we can get to those for the last couple of majors of the year, at least the U.S. Open. We don't have time tonight.
Ooh, parting shot.
But anyway, this has been Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Emmy, before we go, any parting shots?
Let's see. Yeah, let's see.
Do you have any fun debates?
Come on, Denver. Oh.
You want me to check?
Wow, OKC outscores Denver 34-19.
It could still actually be going on.
Wow. Okay.
OKC pulled it out. Wow. I've actually added all these playoff games to my library.
Too. Yeah. They must have
on YouTube TV, and so I'm gonna have to go back and watch the fourth quarter, see how that all went down. Congratulations though to the I have a couple parting shots, both of which are NBA related. Congratulations to the Indiana Pacers. They eliminated the Cleveland Cavaliers,
5 games.
a 64-win team. You could have two 60-win teams gone here pretty soon. Gone in 5 games in the Eastern Conference semifinals. As crazy as that sounds.
Yeah.
And then, man, these injuries are awful. Like the Jason Tatum situation, just terrible. I think that potentially changes a lot for the outlook of the Celtics, because he's not. Tatum's not.
I don't think
he wouldn't be back at the earliest. He'd probably be back for next year's playoffs.
Which means you probably don't have Porzingis anymore at that point. You probably don't have Drew Holiday anymore at that point. Or if you have him, he's 36 years old. You don't have Hal Horford anymore at that point because he's probably going to be retired. That changes a lot.
And so my NBA Finals prediction is trash. Oklahoma City at least could still get there.
Yeah, 3-1 would be.
So I could be half right, but Boston's gone pretty much. They're not coming back from 3-1 without Tatum. Not happening. Because you want to know why? Jaylen Brown has not been good at all, and Kristaps Porzingis looks like he forgot how to play basketball.
Winded. Yeah. He looks winded, just from playing 8 minutes.
And he's dealing with some kind of sickness, but he's been bad. But I don't even blame him as much as I do Jaylen Brown. Jaylen, he was great last year in the playoffs. This year hasn't been all that.
Everybody's hurt.
Yeah. So. That's that. But my last parting shot. If you like guard play, the Eastern Conference Finals.
I mean,
with Jalen
I'm just
Brunson and
imagining
Tyrese
Cat
Halliburton.
getting cooked in pick and roll by Tyrese Halliburton
just saying,
all series long.
that could be
like, I
pretty
don't
good.
like that idea of that for the Knicks. Yes.
The speed of the Pacers is real. They are. I mean, they carved. They carved the
they chewed them up and spit them out.
the Cavs up, and the Cavs are they're a quick team too. But the Pacers are, yeah.
Oh yeah.
And hey, shout out former Longhorn Miles Turner.
He's been on the trade block for
Holy
like 8
cow,
years.
that guy is dominating. He's been fantastic in these playoffs. All right, well,
Yeah.
this isn't an NBA podcast, but we can always fit in a little bit of NBA banter here and there. Next week, look for part 3 of this series or recruiting conversation. I'll real quick lay out how that's going to look. We're going to talk about it's the middle of May, so next week around the 19th or 20th, or the week after, once we get closer to June, we're going to be doing a series of recruiting content. The first 3 weekends in June are big official visit weekends. It's the 3 biggest Texas football recruiting weekends of the year. They host all these prospects for official visits. That's when we'll really get into the depths of who these guys are. Talking about, Felix Ojo or KJ Edwards or all the prospects that they're bringing in and what they would bring to this recruiting class. But until then, on an episode before those official visits start, we'll get into everything that you need to know from a 30,000-foot standpoint about 2026 Texas football recruiting. We'll go position by position, and I'll let you guys know what exactly it is you need to focus on at each position. So look forward to that, and then finish up this series. And then once we get through like the month of June, that's when we start to look ahead to the season. It'll be fall camp starting up for the NFL and college soon after that, and the season's here. So holy shit, we're not all that far away. But we got to get out of here. It's late. I want Emmy to get home, and so I won't drag this on any longer. For Michael Wein, at Michael_Wein1 on X, and for Emmy Nixon, at Emmy_Nixon. This has been Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Enjoy the rest of your week. Peace out. Hook 'em.